I'm on the phone with Jason Cranford Teague, author, expert at Rosenfeld Media, and UX lead at Gannett Digital, a USA Today organization. Jason, good evening your time in Reston, Virginia, and thanks for taking the call.
Yeah, no problem, Bill.
Excellent. So, Jason, you're a veteran web professional. We've known each other for a number of years.
Oh, yeah.
You're always exciting to talk to because you have just a wealth of knowledge and you're passionate about this and a super nice guy to boot, for real. What's going on in your world today?
Well, recently in the last couple of years, I've been really pushing myself in terms of how I develop the user experience, how I plan it out. I have been doing this a long time. Back in the late 90s, we got into, we kind of worked on these systems where we were developing paper prototypes, if you will, wireframes and visual comps, and we were doing all sorts of work in programs like Visio and OmniGraffle, and we were creating all of these, really great paper prototypes, like we were blueprinting out our designs like they were buildings, like we were building monumental structures that were going to stand the test of time. And we would spend months and months just planning out every little detail, every little nook and cranny within the website. And over the last several years, I've found that system just really doesn't work. Just doesn't get you there fast enough, and it doesn't really capture the essence of what web design should be about, which is the interactive side. What I oftentimes say to people is that a lot of designers seem to think that their job stops after the page loads, but really that's where an interactive designer's job should just be starting, is getting in there and figuring out all the interactions, how the user, what happens when they push a button, what happens when they roll over a link, what happens when menus slide out. And that's just really the tip of the iceberg. Really, what we're doing as interactive designers, going far beyond what we think of in terms of visual design.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well said. In fact, that lends itself to the interview topic that I wanted to chat with you about, and that is web professional trends for 2014. Is this a trend? I mean, we've been talking about this for years, those of us that have been in this space, but is this a growing trend you see?
Oh, I think definitely. The more over the last several years, there's been a concerted effort coming from a lot of different places to think about web design in, what started as the agile process, which, debatably started with developers who wanted to be able to iterate around a process of development rather than just trying to develop the whole thing in one fell swoop. I actually, it was funny, when I was first introduced to the concept of agile development about 4 or 5 years ago, I quickly realized, wait, that's kind of the way I designed in the first place. I had more than one project manager taking me to the woodshed because I wanted to go back and change things while the product was in development. I'd rethink something or new information would come to light which would change the way that I wanted to create the design. So I was always iterating around that. It was great though when kind of that became the process, the accepted process for development as well. And I think that's really, I don't think I'm unique in that. I think a lot of designers, they're never happy with what they do. They always want to iterate around it. They always get new ideas. And if you expect all of your questions to be answered up front, then you're really deceiving yourself. You're not going to be able to answer some key questions about the user interface that you're trying to design if you really get in there and start playing around with it. And that doesn't happen until you've got an actual product that you can click at and poke on. And that's why I'm really getting into doing a lot more interactive prototyping, trying to get as close to a final product in a lot of ways as possible, even if it, to a certain extent, it's a facade, but it works as closely as the final product as I can get it.
That's a great point, and I'm glad to hear you say that. In fact, I'm really inspired by what you just said. on many levels because, for years, I've been advocating on behalf of those designers and developers and web business professionals as well. But relative to the designer, this is a lot more than just a fancy image and, nice color and graphics and typography. Web designers are clearly problem solvers, and the experts at this, like yourself, have been doing this for years, right?
Right, exactly. It's interesting you say with the typography. I think some of this has come about because we are relying more and more on code to create our designs and less on cumbersome graphics. With a lot of the more responsive web designs, a lot of these ideas spearheaded from all these different places kind of coming together, but being facilitated by CSS's ability to do better visual design and interactive design at the same time, all hooked around what I see as the most important element in any visual design, which is your typography. Now that we're not saddled with these, what I like to refer to as the fatal 5 fonts that ruled the web for, at least 15 years, and we can really push what typography can do on the web, it allows us to develop our designs more quickly within the actual environment that we're going to be, producing it in the HTML, in the CSS, rather than relying on static comps to do the job for us.
Would it be fair to say that the technology, the techniques within the technology, and the demand for, let's say, for example, mobile and responsive design has now caught up to the vision and the articulation that true web designers that have been problem solvers, that have looked at this from just beyond fancy graphics as a profession for a number of years, have been advocating on. All this has come like full circle, if you will, and now is becoming a reality because this is what the true web designer deals with or should be dealing with on a daily basis. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that's spot on. That's exactly the point. A lot of designers are finally coming around to the realization that if they don't understand cascading style sheets and how to put together an HTML document, they're really cutting themselves short in what they can design. They can imitate what other people do, but in terms of true innovation, they're not really going to be able to push those boundaries. So, if you are a designer for the web, an interactive designer, and you really want to get ahead of your game and become someone who really does the best designs, you have to understand the power of CSS. And then, how do you push that? That's one of the things I do all the time. I'm kind of famous for a lot of my designs I like to experiment. I like to do stuff that's a little bit out there. Sometimes maybe not works exactly the way I want it to, but eventually the browsers will catch up, and then the next thing you know, my designs are fitting really well. I did that recently with a website called urisnight.net, which is one I used a really great framework called the Impress.js framework to create the feeling that you were kind of zooming through space. And I'm starting to play around now with web type iconography, where we use a web font with the glyphs for each of the icons actually built into the font to create our icons rather than using images. And there's all sorts of cool effects that you can do with that. I'm working on some where, you get blurred effects. You can do all sorts of drop shadow effects and other effects. Anything you can do with CSS, you can style your icon to look like.
This takes web design really to a whole new level, right? Mm-hmm. For example, I think this actually elevates the professional web designer in many ways, right? Because it actually defines the role of the web professional designer today.
Oh, yeah, I think definitely. March, I'm going to be speaking at South by Southwest. I'm going to be presenting on prototyping. And where I got a lot of the inspiration for the talk that I'll be giving is from a great quote from Steve Jobs, someone who knew a little bit about user experience, where he said, people think it's a veneer, that the designers are handed this box and told, make it look good. That's not what we think design is. It's not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. And that's kind of over the last couple of years become my guiding principle. Design is how it works. works. Just what it looks like. In fact, in a lot of ways, that's the less important component. It's how it works. That's what people are really going to be responding to.
That whole mantra or user experience on the map, right?
Yeah. And where a lot of even very successful companies are struggling still today because they think it's about, we make it look good or we make it functional, but it's how it works. It's how it feels in your hand. It's how it behaves and performs. It's all of those things coming together. I mean, another great idea from Steve Jobs is that user experience is the entire gestalt of the user experience. It's not just the device they're holding in their hand. It's how they're using it, where they're using it, all those circumstances that surround it, the customer service behind the device. All of that goes into making the user experience, not just the pixels on the screen.
Yeah, well said. Jason, we certainly appreciate all that you do and have contributed to the web professional workforce, your expertise, your great passion for sharing what you've learned over the years at various conferences, including South by Southwest and Web Visions and many others, and most definitely for your time today.
All right. Thanks a lot, Bill.